Imagine walking through the streets of Boston on a cold winter afternoon in January 1919. The city is alive with movement. Workers are heading home. Children are playing in the streets. Horses pull carts through the busy North End. It feels like an ordinary day. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous. And then, a sound. Not an explosion, not a crash, something deeper. A low, violent rumble that seems to come from the ground itself. People stop. They look around. And before they can understand what's happening, the world around them begins to move. A massive steel tank, towering over the neighborhood, suddenly bursts. And in an instant, more than 2 million gallons of molasses explode into the streets. What follows is one of the strangest and most deadly disasters in American history. The tank stood nearly 50 feet tall and held about 2.3 million gallons of molasses. It belonged to the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, and it was used to store molasses that would later be turned into industrial alcohol, an important product during World War I. But this tank had problems from the very beginning. It was built quickly, too quickly. There were reports that it leaked almost immediately after construction. Residents nearby said you could hear the metal groaning. Some even claimed the company painted the tank brown to hide the leaks. Children would come with cups and collect dripping molasses from the sides. It sounds almost unbelievable, but the warnings were there. On January 15, 1919, the temperature in Boston suddenly rose. After days of cold weather, it climbed above freezing. Inside the tank, the molasses began to ferment, creating pressure. Combined with the rising temperature, the pressure inside the tank increased rapidly. The steel couldn't handle it. And at around 12:30 p.m., the tank failed. Not slowly, not with warning. It exploded. A massive wave of molasses surged through the streets at an estimated speed of 35 miles per hour. Imagine that for a second. A wall of thick, sticky liquid, several feet high, moving faster than a car in city traffic. It smashed buildings. It knocked down structures. It lifted horses and people off the ground and carried them away. The force was so powerful that steel girders were bent. Entire buildings were pushed off their foundations. People had no time to react. One moment, they were standing on the street. The next, they were caught in a moving wall of molasses. Some were thrown against walls, others were dragged under. And this wasn't water. Molasses is thick, heavy. It traps you. The more you struggle, the harder it becomes to move. Victims quickly found themselves stuck, unable to escape as the waves swallowed everything around them. The disaster killed 21 people and injured more than 150. Some victims drowned. Others were crushed by debris carried in the wave. Horses, which were common in the streets at the time, suffered terribly. Many were unable to escape and had to be put down later. The entire area was transformed into a chaotic, sticky nightmare. Rescue efforts began almost immediately. Firefighters, police, and volunteers rushed into the scene. But they faced a problem unlike anything they had ever seen. The molasses made movement nearly impossible. It coated everything: streets, buildings, people. Rescuers struggled to walk. They got stuck themselves. It was like moving through glue. Some rescuers used boards and makeshift platforms just to avoid sinking into the mess. It took days to recover bodies and weeks to fully clean the area. The cleanup process was incredibly difficult. Salt water from the harbor was used to try to wash away the molasses. But even then, the sticky residue remained. It coated buildings. It soaked into wood. It lingered in the streets. People later said that on warm days, you could still smell molasses in the area for years after the disaster. But beyond the shock and tragedy, something else happened. People started asking questions. How could something like this occur in the middle of a city? Why was a massive industrial tank placed in a crowded neighborhood? And most importantly, why had the warning signs been ignored? What followed was one of the first major corporate accountability cases in American history. Residents filed a lawsuit against the company responsible for the tank. It wasn't a simple case. The company tried to argue that the disaster was caused by sabotage. They claimed anarchists had planted a bomb. At the time, fear of political extremism was high, and the argument wasn't completely dismissed. But investigators took a closer look. Engineers examined the tank design, and what they found was alarming. The tank had been poorly constructed. The steel was too thin. Rivets were not strong enough. Safety testing had been minimal. In fact, the tank had never been properly filled with water to test its integrity before being used. Basic engineering practices had been ignored. The court case lasted years, but eventually the company was found responsible. It was ruled that the disaster was caused by structural failure due to poor design and negligence. The company was ordered to pay damages to victims and their families, and the impact of this case went far beyond Boston. It changed how industrial structures were regulated in the United States. After the disaster, stricter building codes were introduced. Engineers were required to follow more rigorous safety standards. Inspections became more common. Permits became stricter. In many ways, modern industrial safety regulations were shaped by what happened that day. Today, the Boston Molasses disaster is remembered as one of the strangest accidents in history. It's almost surreal, a flood, not of water, but of molasses. But behind the unusual nature of the event is a serious lesson. It wasn't just a random accident. It was the result of ignored warnings, poor engineering, and lack of oversight. If you visit Boston today, there are no visible signs of the disaster. The area has been rebuilt. The streets are clean, life continues. But history is still there, beneath the surface. And sometimes, on hot summer days, locals say you can still smell a faint trace of molasses in the air. Whether that's true or just part of the city's legend, the story remains. Because what happened in Boston in 1919 wasn't just strange. It was preventable. And like many events in history, it reminds us that disasters don't always come from the unexpected. Sometimes they come from the things we ignore. And once they happen, there's no stopping the wave.